Hola a todos. Hi, everyone. My name is Casey Martin. I am with the Narrative Change Pod at Gente Organizada. I am also a Cal Poly Pomona alumni, which is how I was introduced to Gente Organizada. Today, we are speaking on the theme of ethnic studies and the importance and benefits behind it. I've invited Dr. Anita Jain, who is an excellent Cal Poly Pomona professor and a member of the Pomona Education Coalition. I've actually had the pleasure of taking one of your courses in the past. Dr. Anita, can you tell me briefly just a little bit about yourself and the work that you've done that ties into ethnic studies?
So I guess talk about the current work with Pomona Education Coalition,
Hmm.
right? So um, I got involved with Pomona Education Coalition by accident. I was on I was on their listserv, and then Fabiana and Jesus said, "We're calling an urgent meeting," and I was like, "Oh, it's urgent. I better go, right?"
Uh-huh.
And so I think I'm the only person that goes. And so they start talking to me, and they said, they've been struggling for a while with getting an ethnic studies requirement with the school district, right? And the school district is using Cal Poly Pomona um, because we have a dual enrollment program
Hmm.
with the high schools, and they're using it to say we don't need to have a requirement because we have this dual enrollment program. But that's like 4 classes across the district,
Hmm.
right? And so they were like, "Can you come to the school board meeting with us?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And, and stuff. And the person who's in charge of that program or w- is a former chair of our department.
Hmm.
And so I was like, I know she's not for this. I know she's not for you using the dual enrollment program as a rationale for you not to establish a requirement district wide, right? And so so and also I have to say it's been a real learning experience for me doing this work
Hmm.
because it's like, I'm not an organizer. I feel like I've learned a lot from along the way. Like I think um, Dr. Calderon,
Hmm.
Jose Calderon, and then Jesus have been like great mentors in
Hmm.
that way, and Fabian. And so then I just kept going to the school board meetings with them. And one time, Fabian had asked me to speak at I don't know if it's Pomona Valley Democratic Club or something like that,
Okay.
right? And so um, I only speak for a few minutes on ethnic studies there, but everybody's really receptive and is like, yes, do this. And I noticed that one of the school board members is in the Zoom,
Hmm.
right? And so she can see that everybody, right, is supporting ethnic studies.
Hmm.
So I think, right, um, right, so you have the, right, so I want to say up front, like, I really only come in, right, at the tail end of them actually Pomona Unified School District passing um, the ethnic studies requirement. And so, because I think Fabiana Jesus and Orlando, who's one of the youth with Gente, they had been doing this work for a long time prior to me, and I don't even know about the other people before then, right? But so I want to make that clear, like
Hmm.
this has been like a long time in
Yeah.
coming, right? So it gets passed before Gavin Newsom makes it law, right? So it's that work. The work since then has been about the implementation, right? Them actually, the Pomona Unified School District only um, passed the curriculum. I think this was about 2, 3 weeks ago,
Okay.
right? So, because recently, the last couple months, we've been going to the school board meetings. I think we went to three, um, kind of one after the other in February, March, and then April. And so, um, no, sorry, yeah, no, February and then twice in March, I guess. And so then it got passed. It's great. Now we just need to get the teachers trained, right? Because this is the weird thing about this ethnic studies requirement is that most of the people don't have a degree in ethnic studies, right? And so we have one teacher at Pomona Unified School District that has their degree in ethnic studies.
Hmm.
And she keeps telling me, she's like, they need training. they need training. And so now that's like our next hurdle is establishing what the training is going to be. And then I have a feeling after that it's going to be, a lot like I think we'll be kind of coming towards an end of the this particular campaign. Although I could be wrong, maybe there's going to be more stuff that comes up. I'm not sure. But once we get the teachers trained and we feel like this is good training, um, they'll be kind of on their way.
All set to go.
Yeah.
So in Gente fashion, we like to do something called a rose and a thorn.
Oh yeah,
So
I did that the other day.
a rose meaning something good that's happened to you recently or in general that you'd like to uplift, and a thorn, something that could have gone better or negatively that you feel comfortable enough to share.
A rose. What's been a rose? Um, I did go out to the protests on April 5th.
Oh,
I
okay.
went to the one in Pasadena, and prior to that, I went to the immigration protest in Pomona,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I've been kind of heartened, and in fact, I've been kind of heartened, but there have been a lot of older white people at
Mm-hmm.
these protests, and I've been kind of shocked by it. And so that's been kind of heartening
Mm-hmm.
inside to see that. And so um, I would say the protests have been a rose because this is. Um, I mean, I think all Republican administrations are problematic in their own way. It's just, it's different, right? Because usually they export their violence, right, to other countries. And I mean, not to say that there isn't violence inside the country too. No, that's not exactly quite right, is it? No, I guess it's violence inside and outside. It just feels, you know what it is? It's like Donald Trump had a, what do you call it, a rally before he became president. And that thing, that was the one in New York at Madison Square Garden.
Mm-hmm.
That thing looked like a neo-Nazi rally to me,
Mm-hmm.
completely. I saw the speeches and everything, and I was like, oh no,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to start coming for people. I'm like, this is so, but and it's the level of violence, it's the level of the rhetoric, but it's not just that. It's also, it feels like all these everyday people are involved in it too, which is kind of scary.
Mm-hmm.
There's a book called, oh gosh, I'm going to get the title of it wrong. It's either Ordinary People or Ordinary Men. And it's basically about how these everyday, ordinary people, right, would eventually become the foot soldiers of the Holocaust, right? And it's like, when I looked at that Madison Square Garden rally, I was like, these are everyday people. You know what I mean?
And you'll never know because they're ordinary people.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a thorn that you
Oh,
like
do
to
I have
share?
a thorn?
Is that your thorn?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that would be my thorn
that
for
would be
sure.
mine
Yeah.
too. So moving into ethnic studies, since it is kind of a hot topic right now, it's been challenged,
Yeah.
attacked, as well as pushed forward in our current social climate. What would you say, just in general, what's your take on ethnic studies?
I mean, it feels like in California it's going to go strong and stay strong and um you know, I would have never imagined. I really have to give credit to the Black Lives Matter movement, right? Because I really think that a lot of this wouldn't have happened without Black Lives Matter because now we have at the California state system, you have an ethnic studies requirement. Now we have it high school district wide in California. Um, and I never thought I would get so like involved in it
Mm-hmm.
like I have. I'm surprised as anybody how involved I am in it, but I'm this involved because I really believe educational is a terrain of struggle, right? And that we have to struggle for a particular kind of educational paradigm in order to kind of achieve that liberation, kind of that Freudian liberation. So I see this as a chance of undoing racism, right? And my hope is that there'll be like I'm hoping for a gender and sexuality requirement course too, and I'm hoping for and you can the great thing about ethnic studies and gender and sexuality is that you can learn this through anything. I have a former student of mine who is doing his PhD in critical dance at UC Riverside through, right, an ethnic studies lens,
Mhm.
right? And so the great thing about it is that, right, ethnic studies is interdisciplinary, meaning it's like all the humanities and social sciences. So you can, right, however it connects to you, you can do it, right, through poetry, through the arts, through, whatever, right, whatever vehicle. So I feel really excited and happy about these movements.
Mhm.
There have been problems along the way for sure, right? I mean, Cal Poly Pomona is one example. The CSU system, I would say, most of them have been struggling with their implementation.
Mm.
I would say Cal Poly is probably the worst case scenario
Mm.
of where the resources have been given over to other departments and not to us. And so the struggle continues. This is not over.
Mhm.
And I imagine that they're going to be, there's always going to be attacks on ethnic studies. People are going to try to, at the school district level, probably undo that requirement. So it requires us to kind of always be vigilant and always, right. It's not like, I said, like earlier, I said, we're done at Pomona Unified School District soon with the implementation. I was
Mhm.
like, wow.
Are we?
It's like that's never really true. You have to keep an eye on it,
Yeah.
and you have to get committed people to keep an eye on it all the time because everything gets co-opted.
I know earlier you said undoing racism. So thinking of like ethnic studies and how that can help, what would you say are some core areas of focus that can contribute to undoing racism?
So this has been my experience in teaching ethnic studies is that when students learn about themselves and then they learn about each other, right? That it it heightens their kind of empathetic sensibilities.
Mhm.
And I really also believe that it helps create real relationships, like real authentic relationships, which they haven't necessarily experienced, right? That was my experience when I was in school at Berkeley, when I was at school at San Diego State, when I was doing the stuff with National Conference for Community and Justice. Like when we were learning about each other's struggles, we were in authentic relationship with each other. And it's a deeper kind of relationship that you have with people that that lasts these are my friends for like a long time now,
Mhm.
right? And you become invested in knowing about the ways in which they're marginalized and fighting it because they're your friends,
Mhm.
right? And it's right. This
I love
is
that.
yeah,
Mhm.
and it is like this. You have this ever expanding humanity, right? That goes out to the people you know, but then also to the people you don't know
Yeah.
too, right?
Mhm.
And my experience with students where they're, you know, um, right, that they might feel guilty because they're privileged, they experience racial privilege, right? I have been teaching this for like years. I think I've had 3 issues,
Mm.
right, over 25 years,
Mhm.
right? And so my experience with privileged students is that they feel more grounded, right? They feel right because racism is not just bad for people of color, it's bad for white people too,
Mhm.
right? They're being hoodwinked too. And so right? And so my experience has generally been is that um they come to a better understanding of themselves as well. They become more empathetic. And then when you see students have these more more honest relationships with each other, I think that that's where you can start seeing people being able to access their humanity, right? That much more. And so you have a window in which you can see the possibilities, right? The possibilities of this kind of larger humanity and how good it feels.
Mhm.
Right? People feel good. People feel um, happy to be connecting with each other in these ways.
I would say it kind of links as far as like um the core area would be empathy and then the benefit would be humanity.
Yeah,
That's how it comes
exactly.
across to
Yeah.
me. Um, so in what sense do you think ethnic studies can help break down stereotypes and misconceptions about different ethnic groups?
Well, I mean, I think when you learn about the history of other groups, that's part of it. But well, I'm going to give you an example, right? So there's this chapter I teach called from a book called "Queering the Color Line,"
Mhm.
right? In that chapter, you learn that the construction of racial categories and the construction of sexual categories happens around the same historical period, right? And so, and you learn about scientific racism too, and you learn that they're running these studies, and basically what they're saying is stuff like, if you're black, you're more like a lesbian, right? And they say things like black women have larger clitorises, and so they're using this pseudo scientific language to kind of explain all of this, right? Right. So the students learn this kind of historical chapter, right? Then I do this other exercise and I put it up on the board. I go, I want you to tell me, right? We're going to put up, right, these racial groups and then tell me on this, there's a masculinity, femininity line.
Mhm.
Where do you place them? Right. And I said, for example, not that you believe this yourself, but stereotypically, or what most people think is, right, are black women considered more feminine or less feminine
Mhm.
or normative? And then the students always say less feminine,
Mhm.
right? And then I say Asian men, right? Are they more masculine or less masculine, or are they normative? And then they're like less masculine. So this is right, this is out there now in popular imagination,
Mhm.
right? These kinds of the ways in which you think about racial and right racial groups in relationship to right their gender and sexuality, right? But there's a history to that. That's that chapter I was telling you about in Queering the Color Line. So I connect the history with the contemporary, right? So I'm always trying to do this. I'm always trying to move from the past to the present, right? You know, another like this is a simple example, but um, the there's the 1885 Chinese Exclusion Act,
Mhm.
right? And so the West Coast, particularly California, is really anti-Asian migration, right? And so, you know, they pass various laws. Eventually, they'll be able to get the federal government to pass this larger law to just exclude Chinese people altogether, right? And then I say to students, okay, what group is being hit now? And they're like, Latinx people, right? And so it's like, you can see that some, you know, a similar dynamic can happen to a different group of people,
Mhm.
right? At different periods. And so it's like, I'm always trying to move between the past and the present to look at connections. Also, sometimes things have ruptures too. So to look at things so to see where the continuity happens or where the ruptures happen, but then this kind of constant back and forth. And it's through that, right? It's through doing that back and forth that you make history relevant to students now,
Mhm.
right? And then they can actually see a history of stereotypes, right? It's like, you think black women are less feminine. Okay, I taught you this chapter. Now you know the history of it,
Mhm.
right? So it doesn't come out of nowhere.
That just makes me think of like how you said Latinx is being targeted at the moment. Just even thinking about um, trans people in
Oh,
general
yeah.
and just, the unfortunate events that have happened with. I know there was a brutal murder that happened, and I believe the person was Latinx. So just thinking of things like that and focusing on, you know, the tension with immigrants and stuff like that. So yeah, history is repeating itself,
I
unfortunately.
I always tell students this is like, you should always be asking yourself this question: how is racism getting rearticulated in this moment? How is sexism getting rearticulated in this moment, right? Because you may see an end to one thing. You may see an end to, like, you saw an end to chattel slavery. Okay, well, how is that getting rearticulated? Well, you have a prison industrial complex,
Hmm.
right, where you see mostly black and brown men being incarcerated, right? So you always have to be right, because right? Our political and economic system is still the same. You still have, right, essentially representative government, liberal democracy, and then you have capitalism.
Mhm.
As long as those structures rely on racism and sexism and heterosexism, right? And so as long as those are your structures, right, a particular form of racism may come to an end, but it's going to be rearticulated in a new and different way.
Yeah. Um, so that was more so the education behind our ethnic studies in the classroom.
Okay.
Um, when thinking about it in practice, how do you think that ethnic studies can be integrated into various disciplines? And this can be, you can choose one because I know we can get so into it. So thinking of medicine, law, or law enforcement, and we kind of covered education already. So maybe just thinking out of one from those
Well,
three.
I mean, I think like, well, in medicine, it would be really good, right? Because there's a hit, right? Oh, that's interesting that I just talked about scientific racism,
Hmm.
right? There's a whole history of scientific racism. There, these really good, one by Harriet Washington called Medical Apartheid, right? And so particularly in medicine, I would say there's a lot. Like you could literally just have a class on, um, right, on medicine and ethnic studies, and
Hmm.
basically look at the different ways in which different groups have been targeted, right? Like um, there's the Tuskegee Airmen, the syphilis experiments that happened with them. Oh, not the Tuskegee Airmen. Um, it was veterans, like war veterans,
Hmm.
right? And so what you later find out is that they're being researched around their syphilis, and then there's a cure found for it, penicillin. They do not give it to those men. They do not give the cure to the men so that they can see how syphilis plays out, right? So a few years ago, what's found out is the US government, the military, did those same things in Latin America. I forgot which specific Latin American country.
I want to say it was Guatemala.
I think you're
Them.
right. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Right. And so, right. So they're right. And
On the
people
women.
always question, did they have syphilis or were they injected with syphilis?
Hmm.
Right. But so it's interesting when you can kind of see the ways in which that history moves in all of these different ways. Right.
Hmm.
And what would it mean now if doctors learned about that history, right? And learned about, and right, and then start questioning their own kind of ethical practices
Hmm.
around that, particularly with people of color. Most people of color I know don't have good experiences with doctors,
Hmm.
right? And so it would be great if they took a class on ethics and ethnic studies to kind of learn about,
Yeah.
right, to learn about those
You
things.
would think that it would be a requirement already.
Yeah, you would.
So I'm curious to think how could that play out in like a law enforcement setting? What do you think?
That's a good. That's a good question. My
Hmm.
husband actually used to have to do trainings at the Museum of Tolerance for
Oh,
police,
okay.
right? And so that's like they think it's a joke,
Hmm.
right? And so it was always, that was always a struggle for him. And so, because my thing is like, I would hope it would undo like some of the um I mean, undo law enforcement. I don't, I don't know. But I mean, or at least at the very least, I mean, I guess what you would really hope for is that they would become more empathetic in the communities that they service,
Hmm.
right? And they'd actually be community partners or community officials. Like it would be good if the word police was dropped, right? Because it's like, I if you're in a community that's constantly surveyed, right? You're constantly being watched. You're constantly, people are constantly looking at every move you make, right? I mean, it's unnerving. I mean, I can't imagine, right, living in that kind of space where you're being watched all the time. And so if if there could be like a shift in movement between like let's move away from we're not going to think of ourselves as surveillance officers, we're going to think of ourselves as peace officers or community officers or um,
Hmm.
you know just being friends with people.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think a lot of it is people do get into law enforcement because of the fact that they have empathy, but it's like a different type of empathy for like a general population, and they don't understand the differences between people. And seeing that, you know, in my own personal life, seeing people enter these institutions with that empathy in mind, but it's just I think it's important to have a deeper understanding of who are you being empathetic for.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember
Thank you.
I had a
Thank you for your
student
response.
who had it, they had a study that they were doing on their partner at the time. Their partner was a police officer
Mm,
and started documenting all the stories he'd come home with
mhm.
and how she was feeling like he started off as right like this um, really humane person
Wanting to help.
wanting to help, and then in the process of being a police officer became increasingly right dehumanized,
Mhm.
and in through in that he was being forced to dehumanize others,
Mm.
right? And so it was really it was hard for that student.
Yeah, and to do a study on that. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Um, moving forward and thinking of impact. So, with the work that you've done so far in these groups, how would you suggest ethnic studies be further developed?
Oh, well, I mean, I would like to see. So that's a good question. I mean, so the traditional disciplines in which you would see ethnic studies are in, so all the humanities and social sciences. So that's like dance, music, sociology, poli sci, history.
Mhm.
I'm forgetting some, um, right? And then urban planning, and then
Mm.
education.
Mhm.
So that's traditionally where the ethnic studies disciplines are. Now, oddly enough, sometimes ethnic studies directly contradicts another discipline,
Mhm.
right? Like business,
Mhm.
right? Like that's in direct contradiction. So I don't know how you would change that necessarily, but I think I would say the science fields for sure, right? You could see an ethnic studies developing there in STEM, um,
Mm.
right? And then, uh, oh, and then also probably like architecture,
Mhm.
those kinds of, I mean, I would say almost anything that didn't necessarily any discipline that didn't necessarily contradict the goals of ethnic studies. There's some disciplines that just contradict the goals of ethnic studies, and I don't know how you get around that.
Mhm. Hmm. It's very interesting.
Right? Because it's like, I mean, right, I mean, part of what you learn in a business degree is globalization is good, and
Mhm.
it's, and stuff like that, and it's like, in ethnic studies you learn that it's bad.
Mhm.
And so I don't know how you
Yeah. Um, so circling back, thinking of empathy, um, it's something that we're lacking right now, right? On a local level, on a national level, essentially in America because we live in our individualistic culture. With that being said, thinking about our own call to action, what advice would you give to someone who is interested in pursuing ethnic studies or integrating it in their professional career?
so in terms of I would oh So, I mean, I think that I mean, I'm so thankful for the ethnic studies requirement, right, um, in high schools right now, because it gives us an opportunity now for people to think it's viable for them to get an ethnic studies degree,
Mhm.
which is really no different than any kind of humanities or social science degree you would get, right? Except it has this particular bent.
Mhm.
And so, but I think that the ways to get involved is, I mean, of course you can take the classes, of course you can minor in it. If you go to college, of course you can major in it, but it's really, I mean, ethnic studies actually does come from community, right? Community initiatives initially, right? It's the community who establishes the first programs at San Francisco State,
Mhm.
right? So there's a relationship between ethnic studies, right, and then the communities
Mhm.
to which they serve, right? They have to, I mean, I think that's important to remember. Ethnic studies professors need to remember all the time that they are connected to the community and they service the communities, right? And so, I mean, I think that this is what's great about Gente Organizada, actually, is that, right, it's like, um, right, is this kind of interrelationship between the community and then people, right, who are teaching ethnic studies. And this is this constant to and fro so that we're constantly learning, right, from the community and remembering that that's really where the origins and the roots are from,
Mhm.
right? It's because people in communities were underserved, they were struggling, they didn't see themselves represented anywhere, right? And that's really part of what it means. So I would say, like, if you don't get a degree, that's fine, right? But become part of a community organization, right? Join a movement, right? Um, that deals with some of the issues that we discuss in ethnic studies, right? One of the things we do is we study social movements,
Mhm.
right? Become a part of a social movement. There's so many, right? Pick the thing that you care about, if, and there's so many, if you care about migration, do that. If you care about prison, do that, right? Like so, um, for a few years, I taught at the women's prison in Chino.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was interesting.
Mhm.
Oh, let me tell you, it's kind of a surreal experience to teach incarcerated women about the prison industrial
Oh,
complex.
I can imagine.
Prison guard is watching you do it.
Oh, the
So
pressure.
that's a trip. And then, right, and then after I stopped teaching at the women's prison, right? I then got on the board of a organization called Crossroads, where they had um, what they do is they're a transition program for women who get released
Mm.
from prison, and so they get housing, right? And they go through a program for a year, right? And
Mhm.
so they get counseling because a lot of them have had substance abuse issues, and um, right, and then they get kind of put back on their feet. And for some of them, it's healthy for them to go back to their communities. For some of them, it's not,
Mm.
right? So it's kind of figuring all that out. But those were like, so I've always, I've always tried to be like, right, involved in community because that's right, that's the ethnic studies thing, right? It's like there's you always want to be you you don't it's not just about reading books, right? Or being in a classroom,
Mhm.
right? It's about um experiencing the world outside of that, being in being in connection with the people you study, right? That's okay. So when I taught at the women's prison, right,
Mhm.
I am telling you, there is nobody that can tell you about sexism like incarcerated women. They're like, we get beat, we get paid less, we get, and down the line. If I teach a course um, on sexism at Cal Poly or any other university, this I constantly hear this. Women are like, "It's so much better now, though. It's so much better than what we used to have. It's so much better." And I'm just
Mhm.
like, "Oh man, now I'm gonna have to spend like the semester with you trying to convince you. Like,
Yeah.
is it really so good? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?" But incarcerated women, they'll be the first to tell you it's bad.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, right? It's this constant relationship with communities because because we're all from communities.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And I can't say that I'm necessarily a part of all the communities that I teach about, right? But I believe in being connected with people, right? And and I don't mean to make like artificial connections, right? It's like my 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 growing connection with gente happened through an accidental email that I responded to. And then, of course, I have students who have work at gente. Anel works at gente. Josue works at gente, right? And so it's like, so there's an interrelationship, and then you can continue to build on that relationship,
Mhm.
right? So I'm not saying like be fake, you know, like
That is so real, though. Um, I'm so sad this is coming to an end. Thank you so much for sharing. Your wisdom is just beyond, and I definitely have felt like I was sitting in your classroom again. Um, do you have anything else that you wanna share with us?
I know. I'm trying to think, like, I wish I could I I really believe, right? I mean, so and this is what I think the value of ethnic studies is. He says education in the right hands, right, helps people understand that um, their oppression or their privilege is historically accidental, ac- like a historical accident,
Mhm,
right? So, which means that there's nothing pre-written as to why somebody's oppressed or pre-written as to why somebody's privileged, right? And if you understand that, then you understand that you can change that, right? That you don't have to be right. You don't
mhm,
have to be oppressed.
mhm,
You don't need to. You don't need to be in this category. You can fight against it,
mm,
right? And then Freire also talks about the role of anger, which I've been angry a lot. I mean, I think when you're oppressed, you're angry about it because it's like this is unfair,
mhm,
right? But I think the great thing about anger is that you're hopeful,
mm,
right? And so I think it's this thing of understanding things can change, and right, we have to be hopeful too, right? And um, I think I'd want to end with that idea of be hopeful for the possibility of change, right? You're not oppressed because of something in you, right? There's nothing wrong with you, right? There's something wrong with the world,
mm,
but
mhm,
you as a person are beautiful.
mhm. Oh my god, I feel like you were speaking to me. Thank you so much, Doctor Dr. Jan, for your time and for your wisdom and for sharing with us and our listeners the importance of ethnic studies. And I hope that the viewers have gained, if not anything, at least something. And then just to sign off, join us for our next podcast and stay tuned in. Cuídense todos.